The rain had been falling for 3 days straight when Quinn first saw the pregnant woman staggering toward his Soddie through the mud. Her dress soaked through, and her belly so swollen she looked ready to give birth at any moment. He had been out checking his fence line when he spotted her, and something about the desperate way she moved made him spur his horse into a gallop, reaching her just as her knees buckled. "Madam, I got you," he said, catching her before she hit the ground. Her eyes fluttered open, green as spring grass, and she looked at him with such exhaustion that his heart clenched. "Please," she whispered. "I need somewhere, just for a few days." Quinn was a man of few words and even fewer commitments. At 26, he had built his Soddie on the outskirts of Globe, Arizona, with his own hands 3 years back. Carved out a life from nothing after leaving a ranch up north, where the foreman's temper had run hotter than the Arizona sun. He kept to himself, worked hard, and expected nothing from anyone. But looking at this woman, probably no more than 20 or 21, her auburn hair plastered to her face and her body trembling with cold and exhaustion, he found he could not turn away. "I have a place," he said. "It is not much, but it is dry." She nodded, and he lifted her onto his horse with surprising gentleness for a man with such work-roughened hands. The ride back took only 10 minutes, but he could feel how she sagged against him, her strength nearly spent. The Soddie came into view, a low structure built into a hillside with a roof of prairie grass and walls of packed earth. It was crude but solid, the kind of dwelling that kept a man alive in a land that did not forgive mistakes. He carried her inside, and she looked around at the sparse interior. A wood stove in one corner, a rough table with 2 chairs, a single bed with a thin mattress, shelves holding canned goods and supplies. The walls were bare, the windows nothing but openings covered with oiled paper to let in light while keeping out most of the weather. "You can have the bed," Harrison said, setting her down carefully. "I will take the floor." "I cannot take your bed," she protested weakly. "You can and you will." His tone left no room for argument. He moved to the stove and began building up the fire. "When did you last eat?" She had to think about it. "Yesterday morning, I think." He pulled out bread, some dried beef, and a jar of preserves. As he worked, she watched him with those remarkable eyes, and he felt oddly self-conscious under her gaze. "My name is Katherine," she said finally. "Katherine Foster." Quinn." He brought her the food and a cup of water from the bucket by the door. "Eat slow. Your stomach will not thank you if you rush it." She obeyed, taking small bites, and color began to return to her face. The firelight played across her features, and he noticed she was quite beautiful beneath the dirt and exhaustion. He turned away, busying himself with unnecessary tasks while she ate. "I should explain," Katherine said after a while. "No need." "But you should know. A woman in your condition does not end up alone in the rain by choice," Harrison interrupted, his voice gruff but not unkind. "Whatever your story is, it is yours to keep or tell as you see fit. All I need to know is whether someone is going to come looking for you in a way that might bring trouble." Katherine's hand moved protectively to her belly. "My husband is dead, killed in a mining accident 2 months ago. His brother said the house was his now, and I had to leave. I had nowhere to go." The simple words held a world of pain, and Harrison felt his jaw tighten. "His brother just threw you out, in your condition," he said. "I was not blood, that the baby might not even be his brother's." Her voice broke slightly. "It is, I was faithful. But Thomas had debts, and his brother wanted to sell everything." Harrison poured himself coffee, his movements controlled despite the anger building in his chest. What kind of man turned out a pregnant widow? "Well, you are here now. You can stay as long as you need." "I cannot impose. You are not imposing. I am offering." He met her eyes. "Rest now. We can talk more tomorrow." She was asleep almost before her head hit the pillow, her body finally giving in to exhaustion. Harrison sat at the table, watching the fire and listening to the rain on the roof. He had not asked for company, had not wanted it. But something about Katherine Foster called to a part of him he thought he had buried long ago, the part that still believed a man could make a difference. The rain finally stopped that night, and morning brought clear skies and the clean smell of wet earth. Harrison woke on the floor, his back protesting the hard surface, and found Katherine already up, moving carefully around the small space. "You should be resting," he said, pushing himself to his feet. "I have rested. I need to do something." She gestured at the cluttered room. "Let me help, please. I cannot just take without giving." He wanted to argue, but he recognized the stubborn set of her chin. "All right. But nothing heavy, and if you feel tired, you sit down immediately." A smile transformed her face, the first real smile he had seen from her. "Yes, sir." Harrison headed out to tend to his small herd of cattle and fix the fence damage from the storm. When he returned at midday, he stopped in the doorway, struck by what he saw. Katherine had swept the floor, organized his supplies with a logic he had never managed, and had somehow cleaned the windows. She had even hung a piece of cloth across one corner to create a private space for changing or washing. "You have been busy," he said. "I found some things in your supply chest. I hope you do not mind." She gestured to the makeshift curtain. "I thought it might be useful. It is good thinking." He washed his hands in the basin she had set out. "You made lunch, just beans and cornbread, nothing fancy." They ate together, and the silence was surprisingly comfortable. Katherine asked about his cattle, and he found himself talking more than usual, explaining his plans to expand the herd, his hopes for the land. She listened with genuine interest, asking intelligent questions that showed she understood ranch life. "My father had cattle," she said, "back in Texas. I grew up riding before I could walk properly." "Texas?" Harrison raised an eyebrow. "Long way from home. Thomas wanted to try mining, said we could get rich quick." Her expression turned sad. "He was a dreamer. I loved that about him, but dreams do not pay bills. I am sorry for your loss." "Thank you." She touched her belly again, that protective gesture he was already coming to recognize. "At least I have this piece of him." Over the next few days, Katherine settled into the Soddie with surprising ease. Harrison found himself looking forward to coming back from his work, to finding the small improvements she had made. On Tuesday, she had planted herbs in tin cans outside the door. On Wednesday, she had mended all his shirts, which he had been meaning to do for months. On Thursday, she convinced him to let her walk to the nearby creek, and she returned with wildflowers that she arranged in a jar on the table. But it was Friday that really changed things. Harrison had been gone since dawn, riding into Globe to sell some cattle and buy supplies. The trip took most of the day, and the sun was setting when he finally rode back up to the Soddie. He saw it from a distance and actually pulled his horse to a stop, staring. Curtains hung in the windows. Real curtains, made from what looked like one of Katherine's dresses, cut and sewn into panels that moved gently in the evening breeze. In the fading light, they transformed the Soddie from a bachelor's rough shelter into something that looked like a home. He dismounted slowly and walked inside. Katherine stood by the stove, stirring something that smelled like heaven. She turned when she heard him, and there was nervousness in her eyes. "I hope you do not mind," she said quickly. "The dress was old, and I thought the oiled paper was letting in too much dust, and I found your sewing kit and Katherine." He said her name softly, and she stopped babbling. "They are perfect." The relief on her face made something twist in his chest. How long had it been since anyone had cared what he thought about curtains or anything else? He set down the supplies he had brought, including the extra fabric he had bought on impulse, thinking she might need something for the baby. "I got you this," he said, pulling out the soft cotton. For the little one, her eyes filled with tears. "Harrison, you did not have to, I know. I wanted to." He felt awkward suddenly, not used to giving gifts or being thanked. "How are you feeling? Any pains or anything?" "I am well. The baby is active today." Without thinking, she reached for his hand and placed it on her belly. "Feel." Harrison froze, his palm pressed against the curve of her stomach. Then he felt it, a strong push against his hand, and his breath caught. Life. New life fighting to enter the world. "That is amazing," he said quietly. Katherine looked up at him, and something passed between them in that moment, something neither of them was quite ready to name. He pulled his hand back carefully, and she turned back to the stove, her cheeks flushed. They ate dinner by lamplight, the new curtains casting soft shadows on the walls. Harrison told her about Globe, about the growing town and the mix of miners, ranchers, and merchants trying to make their fortunes. Katherine told him about Texas, about her childhood and the parents she had lost to fever when she was 17. "Thomas was kind to me when I had no one," she said. "I cared for him, I did. But I think he married me because he wanted someone to take care of him, and I married him because I was alone. That is a terrible thing to admit, is it not? It is honest." Harrison refilled her water cup. "Plenty of marriages start with less. Did you ever come close to marrying?" He shrugged. "Once. A rancher's daughter up north, but her father wanted someone with better prospects, and honestly I think she did too. I was not heartbroken for long." "Their loss," Katherine said, and the sincerity in her voice made him look at her sharply. "It is late," he said, standing abruptly. "You should rest." He went outside, needing air, needing space from the confusing feelings churning in his gut. The night was cool, the stars brilliant overhead. He had been alone for 3 years, content with his solitude. Why did Katherine's presence suddenly make his carefully built walls feel like a prison inside? Katherine lay in bed, her hand on her belly, her mind racing. Harrison Quinn was nothing like Thomas. Where her husband had been full of talk and big plans, Harrison was quiet and steady. Where Thomas had made promises he could not keep, Harrison simply did what needed doing without fanfare. She barely knew him, and yet she felt safer with him than she had felt in years. But she could not mistake his kindness for anything more. He was helping her because he was a good man, not because he had feelings for her. She was pregnant with another man's child, a widow with nothing to offer. The best she could hope for was to stay until the baby was born, save what little money she could from helping him, and then find a place of her own. She could not burden him indefinitely. The thought of leaving made her throat tighten, which was ridiculous. She had only been here less than a week. But already, the Soddie felt more like home than anywhere she had lived with Thomas. Saturday morning brought Harrison awake to the smell of coffee and frying bacon. He had spent a restless night, his dreams full of green eyes and auburn hair. Katherine was humming as she cooked, a low melody that spoke of contentment, and he lay there listening for a moment before getting up. "You do not have to cook every meal," he said, joining her at the stove. "I like cooking, especially when someone appreciates it." She handed him a plate. Thomas barely noticed what he ate. They fell into an easy rhythm, working side by side. After breakfast, Harrison declared it a day for maintenance and repairs. Katherine insisted on helping, so he gave her the task of organizing the tack while he worked on fixing a broken saddle. They talked as they worked, the conversation flowing naturally from topic to topic. "Tell me about this place," Katherine said. "How did you end up in Globe?" Harrison leaned back, considering. "I was working a ranch up in Prescott. Good job, decent pay. But the foreman, he had a mean streak. Took pleasure in hurting people, animals, did not matter. One day he was beating a horse that had thrown him, really laying into it with a whip. I told him to stop. He told me to mind my business. I made it my business. You fought him. I stopped him. He threw me off the ranch, told everyone I was a troublemaker. No one up there would hire me after that. He ran his hand over the saddle leather. So I came south, found this land, built the Soddie, started over. You did the right thing, Katherine said firmly. That horse could not defend itself, cost me everything I had built. But you kept who you are, that matters more. He looked at her, really looked at her, and saw she meant it. You are a remarkable woman, Katherine Foster. She blushed, ducking her head. I am just practical. No. You are more than that. He set down the saddle. You have been through hell these past months, but here you are, making curtains and planting herbs and smiling. That takes strength. What choice do I have? I could sit and cry, but that would not change anything. She touched her belly. This baby needs a mother who can stand up, so I stand. The baby chose that moment to kick hard enough that Katherine gasped. Harrison was beside her in an instant. Are you all right? Fine, just a strong one, she smiled, but he saw the flicker of worry in her eyes. What is it? What is wrong? Nothing. I am just worried sometimes, about the birth, about doing it alone. She looked away. Thomas was supposed to be here, his mother too. I thought I would have helped. Harrison felt something solidify in his chest, a decision forming. You will not be alone, I will be here. And there is a midwife in Globe, Mrs. Chen. I will make sure she knows to come when your time is near. Harrison, I cannot ask you. You are not asking, I am telling you. He took her hand, his calloused fingers gentle around hers. You are not alone anymore, Katherine. I give you my word. Tears spilled down her cheeks, and she did not try to stop them. Why are you so kind to me? You do not even know me. I know enough. He wiped her tears with his thumb, the gesture achingly tender. I know you are brave and strong and deserve better than you have gotten. And I know that I want you to stay for as long as you need, maybe longer. The air between them seemed to shimmer with possibility. Katherine's breath caught, and for a moment Harrison thought he might kiss her. But then reality crashed back. She was pregnant, grieving, vulnerable. He could not take advantage of that, no matter what he felt. He pulled back, clearing his throat. I should check the cattle. He left before she could respond, and Katherine stood there, her hand still warm from his touch, her heart pounding. What was happening between them? Could she even let herself feel this way? Thomas had been gone only 2 months. Was it wrong to have these feelings for another man? But her heart knew the truth her mind was struggling with. What she felt for Harrison in these few short days was different from anything she had felt with Thomas. This was deeper, stronger, built on genuine connection rather than convenience and loneliness. Sunday, Harrison surprised her by suggesting they take the wagon into Globe for church services. Katherine had not been to church since Thomas died, and the idea filled her with both longing and dread. People will talk, she said quietly. A pregnant widow staying with a single man. Let them talk. Harrison's jaw set stubbornly. You have done nothing wrong, and neither have I. Besides, Mrs. Chen will be there. I want you to meet her. So Katherine put on her cleanest dress, and Harrison helped her into the wagon with care. The ride into Globe took about 45 minutes, the morning sun warming them as they traveled. Katherine found herself studying Harrison's profile, the strong line of his jaw, the way his eyes crinkled at the corners when something amused him. Globe was larger than she expected, a growing town with a main street lined with businesses. The church was a simple wooden structure, but the bell tower reached toward the sky with determined optimism. People were gathering outside, dressed in their Sunday best, and Katherine felt their eyes turn toward the wagon. Harrison climbed down and helped her descend, his hand steady at her waist. Head up, he murmured. You have nothing to be ashamed of. They walked into the church together, and Katherine felt the weight of curious stares. But Harrison guided her to a pew near the middle, settling beside her with the calm confidence of a man who did not care what others thought. The service was comforting, the familiar hymns and prayers soothing her frayed nerves. Afterward, as people mingled outside, Harrison introduced her to Mrs. Chen, a small, dignified woman in her 50s with kind eyes and capable hands. "Harrison told me you would be coming, Mrs. Chen said, taking Katherine's hands in hers. "How far along are you, dear?" 7 months, I think, maybe closer to 8, Mrs. Chen nodded. "Have you been feeling well? Any pains, bleeding, anything unusual?" "No, nothing like that, just tired sometimes, and the baby is very active." "That is good, active is good." Mrs. Chen smiled. "I will come by in a few weeks to check on you, and when your time comes, send Harrison to fetch me immediately. Do not wait." "Thank you," Katherine said, relief flooding through her. They were turning to leave when a man approached, his face hard and his eyes cold. Katherine froze, recognizing Thomas's brother, Robert Foster. "Well, well," Robert said, his voice dripping with contempt. "The widow has found herself a new man already. That did not take long." Harrison stepped forward, putting himself between Katherine and Robert. "Watch your mouth, Foster. Is it not true? My brother barely cold in the ground, and she is shacked up with the first cowboy who will have her." Robert's gaze raked over Katherine with disgust. "Probably not even Thomas's baby." Harrison's fist connected with Robert's jaw before anyone could react. Robert went down hard, blood spurting from his split lip. The crowd gasped, and several men rushed forward to separate them. "Harrison, no." Katherine grabbed his arm, pulling him back. He was breathing hard, his knuckles bloody, but he let her hold him. Robert climbed to his feet, spitting blood. "You will regret that, Quinn. Both of you will." The sheriff, a stocky man with a weathered face, pushed through the crowd. "That is enough. Robert, get yourself to the doctor." "Harrison, take your woman and go home. I do not want any more trouble." Harrison nodded curtly and guided Katherine back to the wagon. His hands were shaking slightly as he took up the reins, and Katherine covered them with her own. "Thank you," she said softly. "No one has ever defended me like that." He had no right to say those things. Harrison's voice was rough with barely controlled anger. No right at all. They rode in silence for a while, Katherine leaning against his shoulder. Finally, she spoke. "His woman. That is what the sheriff said." "Your woman," he assumed. I did not correct him because it did not matter. But Harrison's ears were red, and Katherine hid a smile. "Would it be so terrible if people thought I was yours?" He looked at her then, really looked at her, and the intensity in his eyes made her breath catch. "Katherine, you barely know me. You have been here just over a week. You are carrying another man's child. I do not want you feeling obligated. I do not feel obligated. I feel grateful, yes, but also something more. Something I probably should not feel this soon, but I cannot help it." She squeezed his hand. "You make me feel safe. You make me feel seen. That is more than I have had in a very long time." "I feel it too," he admitted quietly. "From the moment I caught you in the rain, something just clicked into place, but I do not want to rush you or pressure you. You are not. But maybe we can just see where this goes. Take it slow," he smiled, the expression transforming his usually serious face. "Slow sounds good." When they arrived back at the Soddie, Harrison tended to his horse while Katherine went inside. She stood in the doorway, looking at the curtains she had made, at the small touches that had transformed this place. Then she looked at Harrison, brushing down his horse with patient care, and her heart swelled. She was falling in love with him. It should have terrified her, but instead, it felt like coming home. The next week passed in a blur of simple domestic happiness. Harrison taught Katherine to ride again, finding her a gentle mare from a neighbor. They took slow rides around the property, Katherine delighting in the freedom of being on horseback again. He showed her his favorite spots, a creek where willows grew, a rocky outcrop with views for miles. Katherine continued making improvements to the Soddie. She sewed proper shirts for Harrison from the fabric he had bought, measured to fit his broad shoulders and long arms. She baked bread and pies, rendered soap from fat he had stored, and generally turned the rough shelter into a proper home. They talked for hours about everything and nothing. Katherine told him about her dreams of having a real ranch someday, with a proper house and good breeding stock. Harrison shared his plans for the land, his careful strategies for building something lasting. They discovered shared loves of starlit nights, strong coffee, and the kind of silence that felt comfortable rather than empty. But beneath the growing closeness, worries lurked. Katherine's belly grew larger by the day, and the reality of the coming birth loomed. Harrison found himself lying awake at night, terrified of something going wrong, of losing her or the baby or both. He had already lost his parents, lost his position, lost so much. The thought of losing Katherine made his chest tight with fear. For her part, Katherine worried about the future. What would happen after the baby was born? Would Harrison still want her around? She had no money, no resources. She was completely dependent on his kindness, and that dependence frightened her even as his presence comforted her. 3 weeks after the incident at church, Robert Foster came to the Soddie. Harrison was out checking fence lines, and Katherine was alone, hanging laundry outside. She did not hear him approach until his shadow fell across her. "Hello, Katherine." She spun, her heart hammering. Robert stood there, hat in hand, his expression almost contrite. "What do you want?" "I came to apologize. What I said at church, it was wrong." He took a step closer. "I have been thinking about it, and I realized I was just angry about Thomas, took it out on you when I should not have." Katherine regarded him warily. "I appreciate the apology, but you should go. Harrison will be back soon. That is what I wanted to talk to you about." Robert glanced around as if checking for eavesdroppers. "You are a decent woman, Katherine. You deserve better than living in sin with some cowboy who will probably abandon you once the baby comes." "Harrison would never. You barely know him. What do you really know about him?" Robert's voice turned persuasive. "Come back to Globe. I have a room you can use until the baby is born. After that, if it is Thomas's child, I will help you, proper-like." "No, thank you." Katherine's voice was firm despite her racing heart. "I am happy where I am." Robert's expression hardened. "You are making a mistake. Quinn has a reputation, you know. Got thrown off his last job for fighting. He is violent, unstable. He defended a horse from abuse. That is not the same thing." "Is that what he told you?" Robert laughed. "He nearly killed that foreman, put him in bed for a week. You think a man like that will not turn on you? Get off this property now." Katherine's voice shook, but her eyes blazed. "Fine. But when Quinn shows his true colors, do not come crying to me." Robert settled his hat on his head and strode to his horse. He paused before mounting. Thomas deserved better than to have his wife move on so fast. Think about that. He rode off, leaving Katherine shaking with anger and fear. Not fear of Harrison, but fear of what Robert might do. Men like him did not give up easily, especially when they felt slighted. Harrison returned an hour later and immediately sensed something was wrong. "What happened?" Katherine told him everything, and his face grew progressively darker. "He came here while I was gone." "Yes, but Harrison, he is trying to get under our skin. Do not let him. He threatened you." "He tried to manipulate me. That is different." Katherine took his hands. "I did not believe him. Not for a second. I know who you are." But Harrison was restless that evening, pacing the small Soddie like a caged animal. Finally, Katherine had had enough. "Stop. "Sit down and talk to me," he obeyed, slumping into a chair. "I cannot stand the thought of him coming here, saying those things to you when you were alone. What if he comes back? What if he tries something? Then I will handle it. I am not helpless, Harrison. I know you are not. But you are also 8 months pregnant and in no condition to fight off a grown man if he decides to do more than talk." He ran his hands through his hair. "Maybe he is right. Maybe you would be safer in town." Catherine's heart dropped. "Is that what you want? For me to leave?" "No, God, no." He reached for her, pulling her as close as her belly would allow. "I want you here. I want you safe. I am just scared, Katherine. I am scared something will happen to you." She cupped his face, making him look at her. "I am scared too, but I am safer here with you than I would be anywhere else. Please do not send me away." "I would never send you away." His voice broke slightly. "I love you. I have loved you since you made those curtains, maybe before. I know it is too soon. I know you might not feel the same, but I cannot keep it inside anymore." Katherine felt tears streaming down her face. "I love you too. I think I have since you caught me in the rain and did not ask questions, did not judge, just helped." Harrison kissed her then, gently, reverently, mindful of her condition. It was a kiss full of promise and tenderness, of shared fears and hopes. When they finally pulled apart, both were crying. "Marry me," Harrison said suddenly. "I know the baby is not mine, but I will love it like it is. I will love you both, protect you both for the rest of my life." "Marry me, Katherine." "Yes," she said without hesitation. "Yes, I will marry you." They held each other as the sun set, the curtains fluttering in the evening breeze, the Soddie glowing with lamplight. Outside, the world might be harsh and unpredictable, but inside, they had found something precious and rare. The next morning, Harrison rode into Globe to speak with the preacher. Katherine spent the day in a happy daze, occasionally touching her lips where Harrison had kissed her, hardly believing this was real. She was going to marry him. She was going to spend her life with this good, strong, gentle man. Harrison returned with news that the preacher could perform the ceremony on Saturday, just 3 days away. "I know it is quick, but I do not want to wait, and you are getting close to your time. I want us properly married before the baby comes." Katherine agreed wholeheartedly. The next few days were a flurry of preparations. She made herself a simple dress from the fabric Harrison had bought, dyeing it a pale blue with indigo she found in his supplies. Harrison cleaned up the Soddie until it shone, and borrowed a ring from Mrs. Chen, who was delighted by the news. Saturday dawned clear and bright, a perfect April day in 1887. They drove into Globe together, Katherine's hand clasped in Harrison's. The preacher's wife had decorated the small church with wildflowers, and Mrs. Chen stood as witness along with a few other townspeople who had befriended them. Robert Foster was notably absent, which relieved them both. Katherine stood before Harrison in her blue dress, her belly huge now, the baby seemingly excited by the occasion judging by the constant movement. Harrison wore his best shirt and pants, his hair slicked back, his eyes never leaving her face. "Do you, Harrison Quinn, take Katherine Foster to be your lawfully wedded wife?" the preacher asked. "I do." His voice rang out clear and certain. "And do you, Katherine Foster, take Harrison Quinn to be your lawfully wedded husband?" "I do." Her voice was steady, full of joy. They exchanged simple vows, promising to love and cherish each other through whatever might come. When Harrison slipped the borrowed ring onto her finger, Katherine felt a rightness settle over her, a sense of being exactly where she was meant to be. "You may kiss your bride," the preacher said, smiling. Harrison cupped her face and kissed her softly, and the small congregation applauded. Katherine laughed against his lips, happier than she could remember being in years. They celebrated with a simple lunch at the hotel, Mrs. Chen and a few others joining them. People offered congratulations and gifts, a set of baby clothes, a blanket, a carved wooden rattle. Katherine was overwhelmed by the kindness, and Harrison kept his hand on the small of her back, grounding her. As they prepared to leave, the sheriff approached. "Quinn, I wanted to give you a heads up. Robert Foster has been making noise about challenging your claim to that land. Says you squatted on property that was designated for mining claims." Harrison's jaw tightened. "I filed my claim properly 3 years ago. The land was open for homesteading." "I know, and your paperwork is solid, but he is pushing hard, talking to people at the land office. Just watch yourself." "Thank you for the warning." On the ride home, Katherine sensed Harrison's tension. "He is not going to let this go, is he?" "No, he wants to hurt us any way he can." Harrison's hands were tight on the reins. "But my claim is legal. He cannot touch it." Katherine wanted to believe that, but she had learned the hard way that legal did not always mean protected. Still, she pushed the worry aside. This was her wedding day, and she refused to let Robert Foster ruin it. That night, Harrison carried her over the threshold of the Soddie, making her laugh despite her awkwardness. He set her down carefully, and they stood together in the firelight, husband and wife. "I wish I could give you a proper wedding night," Harrison said quietly. "You deserve romance and time," and Katherine put her finger to his lips. "I have everything I need. You are my romance, Harrison. This life with you, that is all I want." They lay together that night, Katherine's back against Harrison's chest, his arm draped protectively over her and the baby. She felt the child moving, and Harrison's hand followed the movements, his touch gentle. "Hey there, little one," he murmured. "I am your pa now. I'm going to take care of you and your mama, make sure you both have everything you need. You are loved already, more than you know." Katherine felt tears slip down her cheeks. Thomas had never talked to the baby, had barely acknowledged the pregnancy except to complain about the cost of a child. But Harrison was already bonding with this baby who was not his blood, offering a love that was chosen rather than obligatory. "You are going to be an amazing father," she whispered. "I am going to try my hardest." He kissed her temple. "Get some sleep, Mrs. Quinn." "Mrs. Quinn." Katherine savored the name, letting it wrap around her like a blanket. She was Katherine Quinn now, and that meant everything. The next 2 weeks were blissful despite the underlying tension. Harrison built a cradle for the baby, carefully sanding each piece until it was smooth as glass. Katherine sewed tiny clothes and blankets, marveling at how small everything was. They talked about names, arguing playfully over choices. "If it is a boy, what about Henry?" Harrison suggested. "After my father, Henry Quinn, I like that," Katherine smiled. "And if it is a girl, maybe Sarah. That was my mother's name. Sarah Quinn, beautiful." They prepared the Soddie for the baby's arrival, clearing space for the cradle near the bed, stocking up on supplies Mrs. Chen had recommended. Harrison rode into Globe to ensure the midwife knew to be ready, and he arranged for a neighbor boy to be on standby to fetch her when the time came. Katherine's body was preparing too. She felt the baby drop lower, the pressure increasing. Her back ached constantly, and she had trouble sleeping. But every discomfort reminded her that soon she would hold her child, and that made it all bearable. It was a Tuesday evening when the pain started. Harrison was outside tending to the animals when Katherine felt the first real contraction, different from the practice ones she had been having for weeks. This one made her gasp and grip the table. "Harrison," she called, trying to stay calm. He was inside in seconds, his eyes wide. "Is it time?" "I think so. The pains are different." Harrison moved into action with impressive efficiency. He got her comfortable on the bed, then ran to send the neighbor boy for Mrs. Chen. He built up the fire, boiled water, gathered clean cloths and blankets. Katherine watched him work, loving him more with each passing moment. "I am right here," he kept saying. "I am not going anywhere." The pains grew stronger and closer together as the evening progressed. Mrs. Chen arrived just after dark, her bag in hand and her expression calm. She examined Katherine and nodded. "You are doing well. It will be a few more hours yet, but everything looks good." Those hours were the longest of Katherine's life. The pain built in waves, each one stronger than the last, until she felt like she might break. But Harrison never left her side. He held her hand, wiped her face with cool cloths, murmured encouragement when she cried that she could not do it. "You can," he insisted. "You are the strongest person I know. You can do this." Near midnight, Mrs. Chen checked again and smiled. "It is time to push, Katherine. On the next pain, you push with everything you have." Katherine bore down, screaming with the effort. Harrison supported her, his arm around her shoulders, his voice in her ear. "That is it. You are doing so well. Our baby is almost here." 3 more contractions, 3 more pushes, and then suddenly a cry filled the air. Katherine fell back exhausted, and Mrs. Chen held up a squalling, red-faced infant. "It is a boy," she announced. "A healthy baby boy." Katherine burst into tears, and Harrison was crying too. Mrs. Chen quickly cleaned and wrapped the baby, then placed him on Katherine's chest. He was perfect, with a shock of dark hair and eyes that seemed to stare right into her soul. "Henry," Katherine whispered. "Our Henry." Harrison touched the baby's tiny hand, and Henry immediately gripped his finger with surprising strength. "Hey, son," Harrison said softly. "Welcome to the world." Mrs. Chen finished her work, checking that Katherine was recovering well, giving instructions on nursing and care. Before she left, she pulled Harrison aside. "You did good, Harrison. Not many men have the stomach for childbirth, but you were exactly what she needed." After Mrs. Chen left, Harrison and Katherine lay together, Henry between them, both marveling at the miracle they held. The baby nursed hungrily, and Katherine felt the pull of connection, of love so fierce it took her breath away. "He looks like you," Harrison said, studying Henry's face. "He has your nose." "He has Thomas's hair," Katherine said honestly. "We should not pretend otherwise." "No, we should not. Thomas gave him life, and we will tell Henry about his birth father when he is old enough to understand. But I am his papa, and I will raise him like he is my own blood." "I know you will," Katherine kissed him. "You already are." They dozed off as dawn broke, exhausted and happy, Henry sleeping peacefully between them. The Soddie was quiet except for the baby's soft breathing and the crackle of the fire, but their peace was short-lived. 3 days after Henry's birth, Robert Foster came back. Harrison was in the barn when he heard the sound of multiple horses. He stepped outside to see Robert and 2 other men riding up, their faces hard. Harrison's hand moved to the rifle he now kept near the door. "Foster, you are not welcome here. This is not a social call, Quinn." Robert dismounted, pulling out papers. "I have been doing some research. Turns out your land claim has issues. The surveyor made errors, and the boundary line is actually 50 feet east of where you thought. Your Soddie is on mining land, not homestead land." Harrison felt cold dread wash over him. "That is a lie. It is in the paperwork, certified by the land office." Robert smiled coldly. "You have 30 days to vacate, or I will have the sheriff remove you. You cannot do this. I have a wife and newborn son, should have thought of that before you stole land." Robert mounted his horse. 30 days, Quinn. Do not make this harder than it has to be." They rode off, and Harrison stood there, his world crashing down. Everything he had built, everything he had planned, threatened by a technicality and a vengeful man. He walked slowly back inside where Katherine was nursing Henry. She took one look at his face and her heart sank. "What happened?" He told her everything, his voice flat. Katherine listened, her mind racing. Can we fight it? Get our own surveyor? That takes time and money we do not have. And Robert probably bribed the land office to back his claim. Harrison sank into a chair. I am so sorry, Katherine. I brought you into this mess. Stop that right now. Katherine's voice was sharp. You did not bring me into anything. We are partners and we will figure this out together. But as the days passed, the situation looked increasingly hopeless. Harrison consulted with a lawyer in Globe who confirmed that the paperwork, while suspicious, would be difficult to challenge. They would need their own survey, which cost money they did not have, and even then, there was no guarantee they would win. Katherine watched her husband grow more withdrawn, the weight of failure crushing him. He still tended the animals, still provided for them, but the light had gone out of his eyes. She tried to encourage him, but her words seemed to bounce off the walls he was building. 2 weeks into the 30-day deadline, Katherine made a decision. While Harrison was out, she bundled up Henry, borrowed the wagon, and drove into Globe. She went straight to the land office and asked to see the surveyor's report Robert had filed. The clerk tried to refuse, but Katherine was persistent. My husband's home is at stake. I have a right to see the evidence being used against us. Finally, the clerk relented, pulling out the documents. Katherine studied them carefully, her heart pounding. She had helped her father with ranch paperwork for years. She knew what to look for. And there it was, a small discrepancy in the dates. The survey was supposedly done 6 months ago, but it referenced a landmark, a lightning-struck tree that had only fallen in a storm 2 weeks ago. The survey was forged. Katherine took careful notes, then drove directly to the sheriff's office. She laid out everything she had found, her voice steady despite her shaking hands. The sheriff listened, his expression growing grimmer. This is serious, Mrs. Quinn. If Robert Foster falsified official documents, that is fraud. Will you investigate? I will. But I need you to understand, even if we prove it is fraud, it will take time. You might still have to leave the land temporarily. Katherine's heart sank, but she nodded. I understand. Just please do what you can. She drove home to find Harrison in the barn, and she told him everything. For the first time in days, hope flickered in his eyes. You did that. Went into town, figured it all out. Of course I did. You are my husband, and that is our home. I was not going to just let Robert steal it. Harrison pulled her close, careful of the baby. I do not deserve you. You deserve everything good, Harrison Quinn, and I am going to make sure you get it. The next few days were tense. The sheriff launched his investigation, calling in experts to examine the survey documents. Robert, sensing trouble, tried to push for immediate eviction, but the sheriff insisted on waiting until the investigation concluded. Meanwhile, Katherine and Harrison prepared for the worst. They packed their essential belongings, made plans for where they could go if they had to leave. Harrison hated every moment of it, but Katherine kept him focused. Even if we have to go, we will be together, she reminded him. That is what matters. On the 28th day, the sheriff came to the Soddie. Harrison and Katherine met him outside, bracing for bad news. But the sheriff was smiling. The survey was definitely forged. The surveyor admitted Robert paid him to backdate it and fabricate the boundary issue. Robert Foster has been arrested for fraud and attempted theft of property. Katherine felt her knees go weak with relief. Harrison caught her, holding her tight. It is over. We can stay. You can stay. Your original claim is valid, and there is no question about the boundaries. The sheriff tipped his hat. You have a smart wife, Quinn. She saved your home. After the sheriff left, Harrison spun Katherine around, making her laugh. You did it. You brilliant, amazing woman, you saved us. We saved us, she corrected. Together. They celebrated that night. The crisis passed, their future secure. Henry slept in his cradle, unaware of the drama that had nearly cost him his home. Katherine and Harrison sat by the fire, talking about their plans now that they knew they were staying. "I want to expand the herd," Harrison said. "Build us a proper house eventually, something bigger than this Soddie." "I want chickens," Katherine added, "and a vegetable garden, maybe a milk cow. We will have all of it, I promise." The months that followed were filled with hard work and joy. Henry grew rapidly, transforming from a tiny newborn to a chubby, smiling baby who clearly adored his parents. Harrison was devoted to him, spending every spare moment playing with his son, teaching him the ranch sounds, introducing him to the animals. Katherine bloomed too, her body recovering from childbirth, her heart full. She and Harrison fell into a rhythm, working the ranch together, building their dreams side by side. The Soddie, small as it was, rang with laughter and love. They heard through town that Robert Foster had been sentenced to 2 years in prison for the fraud. His property was seized to pay his debts, including the house that had belonged to Thomas. Katherine felt a distant pang for what might have been, but mostly she felt grateful for how things had turned out. As Henry's first birthday approached, Katherine realized she was pregnant again. She told Harrison one evening, nervous about how he would react. They had talked about more children eventually, but this seemed so soon. Harrison's face lit up like the sun. "Really? Another baby? Are you happy? I know Henry is still so young. I am thrilled." He placed his hand on her still flat belly. "This one will be ours from the start." "Ours to plan for, to dream about." Katherine relaxed, smiling. "I was hoping you would say that." The pregnancy progressed smoothly. Katherine's body apparently better prepared the second time around. Harrison built an addition onto the Soddie, creating a second room for the children. It was not the big house they dreamed of, but it was progress, a sign of their growing family and prosperity. Henry took his first steps on a sunny October day, stumbling into Harrison's arms with a triumphant giggle. Katherine watched, her hand on her growing belly, feeling complete in a way she had never imagined possible. The new baby, a daughter they named Sarah after Katherine's mother, was born on a snowy January evening in 1889. Her arrival was easier than Henry's had been, and Harrison caught his daughter as she entered the world, tears streaming down his face. "She is perfect," he breathed, handing her to Katherine. "Absolutely perfect." Sarah had Katherine's auburn hair and Harrison's blue eyes, a perfect blend of both of them. Henry, now 18 months old, was fascinated by his tiny sister, wanting to touch her gently and bring her his toys. With 2 small children, life became busier and more chaotic. But Katherine and Harrison worked as a team, taking turns with night feedings, managing the ranch work around nap times and nursing schedules. They were exhausted much of the time, but deeply, profoundly happy. On their second wedding anniversary, Harrison surprised Katherine with a picnic. Mrs. Chen came to watch the children, and Harrison took his wife to the rocky outcrop with the beautiful view. They sat together, eating cold chicken and fresh bread, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of gold and crimson. "2 years ago, I thought my life was over," Katherine said softly. "I was pregnant, alone, scared, and then I found you." "I found you," Harrison corrected, "and you gave me everything I did not know I needed, a wife, a family, a purpose beyond just surviving. Do you ever regret it, taking me in, taking on Thomas's child?" Harrison turned to her, his expression fierce. "Never, not for one single second. Henry is my son in every way that matters, and you, Katherine Quinn, you are the love of my life. I would do it all again in a heartbeat." She kissed him, pouring all her love and gratitude into that kiss. When they finally pulled apart, both were smiling. "What are you thinking?" Harrison asked, seeing the expression on her face. "I am thinking that life is strange and wonderful. If Thomas had not died, if his brother had not been cruel, if it had not rained that day, I never would have found you. I should feel guilty for being glad of how things worked out, but I cannot. This, here with you, is where I was always meant to be." "I am glad too," Harrison admitted. "Not that Thomas died or that you suffered, but that we found each other. You have made me happier than I ever thought possible." They stayed on the outcrop until the stars came out, talking about their dreams for the future. Harrison wanted to buy more land, expand the cattle operation. Katherine wanted to start breeding horses like her father had done. Both wanted more children, a house full of love and laughter. As the years passed, those dreams came true one by one. Harrison proved to have a brilliant mind for ranching, turning their small operation into one of the most successful in the area. Katherine established a reputation for training exceptional horses, animals known for their intelligence and gentle temperaments. They had 3 more children, 2 boys and another girl, each one welcomed with joy. Henry grew into a thoughtful, serious boy who adored his younger siblings. Sarah was wild and free, always climbing trees and chasing the ranch dogs. The younger children filled the house Harrison finally built, a proper 2-story structure with real glass windows and wooden floors. But they never tore down the Soddie. Instead, Harrison and Katherine converted it into a storage building, but they kept the curtains Katherine had made hanging in the windows. Sometimes, on quiet evenings, they would walk out there and remember those early days when everything was uncertain and new. "This is where it all started," Katherine would say, touching the rough walls. "This is where I learned what love really means," Harrison would reply. On their 10th wedding anniversary, they threw a party. The new house was filled with friends and neighbors, children running everywhere, the sound of music and laughter echoing off the walls. Mrs. Chen, now in her 60s but still sharp as ever, raised a toast. To Katherine and Harrison Quinn, who proved that the best love stories start when you least expect them. May you have 50 more years of happiness. Everyone cheered, and Harrison pulled Katherine close, kissing her soundly despite the catcalls from their friends. When they pulled apart, both were laughing. That night, after the guests had left and the children were asleep, Katherine and Harrison lay in their bed, exhausted but content. Harrison traced patterns on Katherine's arm, his touch familiar and comforting after so many years. "Do you remember that first week?" he asked. "When you were so determined to help, making curtains and planting herbs?" "I remember feeling like I had to earn my place," Katherine admitted. "I did not realize you had already decided I belonged. I think I knew from the moment I saw you that my life was about to change. I just did not realize how much, or how grateful I would be for that change." Katherine rolled over to face him, studying the lines time had etched into his face. He was in his late 30s now, his hair touched with silver at the temples, but to her he was as handsome as ever. "I love you, Harrison Quinn, more now than even on the day we married." "I love you too, Katherine, more than words can say." They fell asleep tangled together, the way they had every night for 10 years. Outside, the Arizona night was clear and cool, the stars brilliant overhead. The ranch was quiet except for the occasional sound of a horse or cow, peaceful and prosperous. Henry, now 12 years old, sometimes asked about his birth father. Katherine and Harrison were always honest with him, telling him about Thomas's kindness and his dreams, about how he had died trying to provide for his family. But they also made sure Henry knew that Harrison was his father in every way that mattered. "Pa loves you like crazy," Sarah told her brother once when she overheard him worrying about it. "We all know that. Blood does not matter." And it was true. As the years continued to pass, the family grew closer, bound not by blood but by choice and love and shared experiences. The younger children never even questioned that Henry was anything but their full brother, and Henry himself grew into a man who embodied the best of both his fathers, Thomas's optimism and Harrison's steadiness. When Henry turned 18, Harrison and Katherine signed over a portion of the ranch to him, helping him start his own small operation. He built his house less than a mile from theirs, staying close to the family he loved. Within a year, he married a sweet girl from Globe, and soon Harrison and Katherine were grandparents. Sarah followed her mother's passion, becoming an exceptional horse trainer. She married a cowboy who worked the ranch, a good man who Harrison approved of wholeheartedly. The younger children found their own paths, one becoming a teacher, another following his father into cattle ranching, and the youngest, a daughter, surprising everyone by studying to become a doctor. Through it all, Katherine and Harrison remained the center of their family, the foundation on which everything was built. Their love, which had started in desperation and grown through adversity, became legendary in the area. People spoke of the pregnant widow and the cowboy who had given her a home, and how that act of kindness had blossomed into a love story for the ages. On their 25th anniversary, their children threw them a huge party. The ranch was packed with people, 3 generations of family and countless friends. There was music and dancing, food and laughter, stories and toasts. Harrison and Katherine stood at the center of it all, holding hands, watching the life they had built together. "Do you remember what you told me that first night?" Katherine asked softly. "You said I could stay as long as I needed, maybe longer." Harrison smiled, the expression still capable of making her heart skip. "I think maybe longer has turned into forever. Forever sounds perfect to me." As the sun set on that celebration, painting the Arizona sky in brilliant colors, Harrison led Katherine onto the makeshift dance floor. The band played a slow waltz, and they moved together with the ease of long practice, their bodies knowing each other's rhythms. "I would do it all again," Harrison said, his lips near her ear. "Every hard moment, every struggle, every fear, because it all led to this, to you, to us." "So would I," Katherine whispered back. "You saved me, Harrison, in every way a person can be saved. No, we saved each other." And that was the truth of it. 2 people, thrown together by chance and circumstance, who had chosen to build something beautiful from the wreckage of their pasts. Katherine had moved into his empty Soddie carrying another man's child, desperate and alone. Within days, she had made curtains, transformed his house into a home, and without even realizing it, transformed his heart. They danced as the stars came out, their children and grandchildren watching with smiles. The old Soddie still stood on the edge of the property, the curtains still hanging in the windows, a monument to where their story began. But the real story was not in that small structure or even in the grand house that had replaced it. The real story was in the hands that remained clasped after 25 years, in the love that had only deepened with time, in the family that had grown from one desperate act of kindness. Years continued to pass, and Harrison and Katherine grew old together, their hair turning silver, their steps slowing, but their love never diminishing. They sat together on the porch of their house on summer evenings, watching the sun set over the land they had worked so hard to build. Sometimes they talked about the old days, laughing over memories of those early, uncertain times. "Remember when Robert tried to steal the ranch?" Harrison would say. "And you marched into that land office and figured out his whole scheme." "I was terrified," Katherine would admit, "but more terrified of losing you and our home." On Katherine's 60th birthday, Harrison surprised her with a gift. He had commissioned a painting of the Soddie, complete with the curtains in the windows, exactly as it had looked that first week. Katherine cried when she saw it, touched that he remembered every detail. "That was when I knew," Harrison said, pointing to the curtains in the painting. "When I rode up and saw those curtains, I knew you were not just staying temporarily. You were making a home, our home." "I did not realize I was doing it," Katherine confessed. "I just wanted to make things nice for you, to show my gratitude." It was more than gratitude. Even then, it was love. Maybe we did not know it yet, but it was there. They hung the painting in the living room where everyone could see it. It became a focal point for family gatherings, a way to tell the younger generations about where it all began. The great-grandchildren would stare at the painting, trying to imagine their strong, graceful great-grandmother as a desperate pregnant woman, their dignified great-grandfather as a lonely cowboy. "Tell us the story again," they would beg. And Harrison and Katherine would oblige, each adding details the other forgot, interrupting each other with affectionate corrections, making the children laugh with the tale of curtains and love and a life built from nothing. When Harrison turned 70, he slowed down significantly, his body finally acknowledging the decades of hard ranch work. He handed over the day-to-day operations to Henry and his other children, though he still insisted on checking the cattle every morning. Katherine worried about him, but she understood. The ranch was part of him, as essential as breathing. "Come with me," he would say, and Katherine would climb into the wagon, and they would ride the property together, just as they had 40 years earlier. They would visit the old Soddie, still standing, still bearing those curtains. They would sit by the creek where willows grew, where Harrison had first taught Katherine to ride again. They would watch the sunset from the rocky outcrop where they had shared so many important moments. "We have had a good life," Katherine would say on those rides. "The best life," Harrison would correct, "because I have had you." When Harrison was 73, he fell ill. It started as a cough that would not go away, progressing to weakness and fever. The doctor, their youngest daughter who had fulfilled her dream of medicine, did everything she could, but they all knew. Harrison Quinn was dying. Katherine refused to leave his side. She sat by his bed, holding his hand, talking to him even when he was too weak to respond. Their children and grandchildren came to say goodbye, and Harrison rallied long enough to speak to each one, to tell them he loved them, to make sure they knew how proud he was. On a quiet spring morning, with Katherine holding his hand and the curtains, new curtains but in the same style as the originals, fluttering in the breeze from the open window, Harrison Quinn took his last breath. He was looking at Katherine, and his last words were, "My beautiful girl, my home." Katherine wept, her heart breaking even as she knew she should be grateful for the 45 years they had shared. The funeral was huge, the entire town turning out to honor a man who had been respected and loved by all. They buried him on the ranch, on a hill overlooking the land he had loved, near the old Soddie where it all began. For months after, Katherine struggled. She had been with Harrison for so long, had built her entire adult life around him, that existing without him felt impossible. But her family rallied around her, her children insisting she move between their houses, her grandchildren visiting constantly, keeping her engaged with life. Slowly, painfully, Katherine found a new normal. She spent time with her great-grandchildren, teaching them to ride, telling them stories of their great-grandfather. She took up painting, creating scenes from her memories. And she visited Harrison's grave every single day, bringing flowers, telling him about the family, about the ranch, about everything he was missing. "I will see you again," she would tell his headstone. "Not yet, but someday." Katherine lived to be 82 years old, sharp and spirited until the end. When she finally passed peacefully in her sleep, Her children found her with a smile on her face, as if she had seen something wonderful. They buried her next to Harrison, and the entire town came again to pay respects to the woman who had transformed a lonely cowboy's Soddie into a family empire. On her headstone, beneath her name and dates, they carved the words Harrison had said so many years ago. "We saved each other." Henry, now in his 60s, took on the responsibility of maintaining his parents' legacy. He preserved the old Soddie, making sure it never fell into disrepair. He kept the curtains, the originals by now too fragile to hang, in a special case in the main house. And he told the story to anyone who would listen, the story of how a pregnant woman moved into his father's empty Soddie, and by Friday, there were curtains in the windows. "That was when Pa knew," Henry would say, his voice full of love and pride. "That was when everything changed." Those curtains represented hope and home, and a future he had not dared to imagine. Ma gave him that with nothing but some fabric and a needle and thread. But really, she gave him everything. The ranch continued for generations, the Quinn name becoming synonymous with quality cattle and horses. But more than that, it became synonymous with love and family, and the belief that the best things in life come from choosing to care for one another, even when you do not have to. Great-great-grandchildren played in the shadow of the old Soddie, making up stories about the curtains and the cowboy and the pregnant lady. The painting Harrison had commissioned was carefully preserved, passed down as a family treasure. And every generation learned the story, learned about Katherine's bravery and Harrison's kindness, about how two broken people had found each other and built something beautiful. On what would have been Harrison and Katherine's 70th wedding anniversary, the family gathered at the ranch. Over 100 people, all descended from or connected to that original union, came together to celebrate. They stood before the old Soddie, the curtains still hanging in the windows, maintained by loving hands across the years. Henry, now very old himself but still strong in spirit, led a toast. "To my parents, who taught us all what love really means. Not just the easy love of good times, but the hard love of choosing each other every single day, of building something from nothing, of opening your heart even when you have every reason to keep it closed." Ma moved into Pa's Soddie carrying me, pregnant and desperate. Pa took her in without hesitation, without asking for anything in return, and by Friday, there were curtains in the windows. That was all it took. A few days and some curtains, and two lives changed forever. Everyone raised their glasses, and as the sun set over the Arizona land that Harrison and Katherine had loved so well, they drank to love, to family, to the power of small kindnesses that change everything. The old Soddie stood silent witness, its curtains moving gently in the evening breeze, a testament to where it all began. Inside that rough structure, two people had found each other. Inside that humble dwelling, love had taken root against all odds. And from that love had grown a family tree with branches spreading wide and deep, all because a cowboy had helped a pregnant woman, and she had thanked him by making his house a home. The story passed into family legend, told and retold, each generation adding their own understanding and perspective. But the core remained the same. Love is not about grand gestures or perfect circumstances. Love is about choosing someone and being chosen in return. Love is about making curtains when you have nothing else to give. Love is about seeing someone at their most vulnerable and offering shelter without judgment. Harrison and Katherine Quinn had lived that truth every day of their 45 years together. They had turned a desperate moment into a lifetime of joy, a simple Soddie into a dynasty, a chance meeting into a love story that endured long after they were gone. And through it all, the curtains remained, hanging in the windows of that old Soddie, a symbol of home and hope and the beginning of everything beautiful. Visitors to the ranch would always want to see them, to stand in that small space and imagine the moment when Katherine first hung them, the moment when Harrison first saw them and knew his life had changed forever. "It is just curtains," people would sometimes say, not understanding. But the Quinn family always knew better. They were never just curtains. They were a promise and a declaration. They were the first sign that Katherine Foster Quinn belonged in that Soddie, in that life, with that man. They were the beginning of a love story that proved the best things in life are worth waiting for, worth fighting for, worth choosing every single day. And in a world that could be harsh and unforgiving, in a time and place that did not offer easy answers or guaranteed happy endings, Katherine and Harrison had created their own miracle. Not through luck or fate, but through simple human kindness, through choosing to see past their own pain to help someone else, through having the courage to love when love seemed impossible. That was their legacy, more valuable than the land or the cattle or the prosperity they had achieved. They had shown generations of their family what it meant to love well, to love truly, to love in a way that transformed everything it touched. And it all started with a pregnant woman, an empty Soddie, and curtains in the windows by Friday. The end came full circle, as all good stories do. The ranch still thrived, the family still gathered, the love still endured. And the old Soddie still stood, its curtains still hanging, a quiet testament to the truth that home is not a place but a person, that love is not a feeling but a choice, and that sometimes the best thing you can do for someone is simply open your door and let them in. Harrison and Katherine had done that for each other, and in doing so, they had built something that outlasted their mortal lives. They had created a family bound by love rather than just blood, a legacy of kindness and courage, a story that would be told for generations to come. And in the end, that was everything. That was more than either of them had dared to hope for on that rainy day when their paths first crossed. That was the happy ending they had earned through years of choosing each other, supporting each other, loving each other through every joy and sorrow life brought. The curtains still hung in the windows, faded now but carefully maintained, a symbol of where it all began and a reminder of what mattered most. Not wealth or status or easy living, but the simple, profound truth that love, real love, the kind that lasts, starts with a choice to care for someone else as much as you care for yourself. Harrison and Katherine Quinn had made that choice, lived that choice, and in doing so had created a love story that would never truly end. Because love like theirs does not die when bodies fail. It lives on in the lives it touched, the family it created, the legacy it left behind. And that is the story of how a pregnant woman moved into a cowboy's empty Soddie. And by Friday, there were curtains in the windows, and how those curtains became the symbol of one of the greatest love stories the Arizona Territory had ever known.